with other people. I mean, I think on a straightforward basis, we can look at where you are, what your questions are, and then set some goals and parameters so that you actually have some stepping stones, because you cannot do everything all at once. And I think sometimes it's very difficult to see the wood for the trees when you're in your own business. And that's true across small businesses and large businesses. You can kind of see the result of something not working, but it's quite hard to understand what was the actual thing further down the chain that caused that. So I think business mentoring is about fast tracking some decision making by paying for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you say, that kind of leadership is necessary. And the important thing is, as a small brand, you start out working by yourself, but it's the kind of thing that you should definitely not be doing alone. So kind of having that advice and that kind of guidance from an outside perspective is invaluable, really.
Sorry, just to interrupt. I think as well, you'll need lots of different advice. You'll need accounting advice. You'll need legal advice, and you shouldn't be.
Oh, sorry, Karen. I think your audio just dropped out there.
It went on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
That's great. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think that you should, everyone needs different advice at different times. So it's not a failure of a business leader to go and look for advice. And one of the things that I know we'll talk about a little bit later is how do you grow and how do you build on those leadership things? And that is your network, and your network will be part of these advisors as well. So it's really a starting block of how you grow and how you can succeed. Sorry.
No, definitely. That's great. Thank you. And the whole kind of point of this is to make your business scalable and grow. And so kind of what are the backbones of business structure and the fundamentals for this? What do you kind of need to have in place to be able to kind of get to that point?
I think there's quite a list of things. I think the first thing you need is a vision. And sorry, I've got a bit of hay fever at the moment, which is why I'm blowing my nose. I've got the window open, the pollen is flying around. I think you need a vision. I think you need to know, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who's it aimed at. And I can certainly help develop a framework around that. But I think that is a really important starting point, is what on earth are you doing this for? A next really important step, but it's a rather boring one, is some finance skills. You do need to be able to manage your money. You do need to be able to wander around a spreadsheet. And I think if you're not really a numbers person, you should really get to grips with the basics of accounting. Because if nothing else, you'll be able then to employ the right accountant. So those are two things that are key. Then you come on to things like operational structure and processes, and this is where I spend a lot of time. And I think this is where businesses can also get unstuck, in that if you're, especially legacy businesses, have got old systems and then they're trying to update, so they can't be as agile as kind of digital natives, online businesses, pure players, whatever you want to call them. So certainly your operations and your processes, and putting in some good systems. So how do you manage your customers? How do you communicate between your teams and your clients? How do you track your sales and your jobs? How do you track your marketing? There are tools that enable you to do this quite easily, or you can do them with a pen and paper and meet yourself going backwards because you're just not being very efficient at it. So I think spending time on that is important. The next thing is your people, your teams, the people that are going to help you be successful. And I think for me, they are a really key part of driving your business forward. I think measuring what people do, giving realistic expectations of what you want to achieve, then people get a real sense of worth in a project. So I really think that the people that you choose to hire, you should spend time and effort making sure that the fit is right and you understand clearly what you expect them to be doing. That's another common thing. I would go into businesses and find that there are some great people, but they've not been managed very well, and they didn't really have a purpose. And it's really hard. It's hard for everybody. Brands, you need to be clear about what your brand is. You know, what are your brand values? What do you stand for? What does your logo look like? Is it clear? Are you giving everyone exactly the same thing? So that's quite a simple housekeeping thing, but that can really make a difference to how people see you presented into the wider audience, which then leads you on to sales and marketing, which is another key area. How are you driving people to your brand? You know, you can have a sales plan for a specific product, or you have an overall marketing plan for where you want to go, and then you'll have your social marketing media plan for how you're going to get there. So there's 3 quite different parts to that, but they're all built towards selling, which is the objective. Customers, your lovely customers, how are you treating them? What returns are you doing? How do you talk to them? What do you learn from them? And then I think back to the operations, really, how do you manage your day-to-day calendar and your teams? You know, get organized. What's your bookkeeping like? Do you count your sales on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? So there are quite a few steps, but and I wouldn't expect everyone to have all of them working perfectly, but they do interact. And when you have got them working aligned in the same direction, it will be more straightforward to get results and measure the activity of your business. That's a bit of a long answer, sorry, but I think that, you know, you asked for the fundamentals, and that's what I would suggest the fundamentals are.
Definitely. No, I think it's very good to be realistic. Obviously, there's so many different sides to running a business, and these are all areas that we have to consider. So no, I think it's definitely good to kind of give the wider picture, and obviously you can go into so many kind of rabbit holes there. You can go into like a kind of snowball effect, because every kind of area is really important to kind of make that a successful business. Do you have any kind of advice on being that leadership person, like maybe a couple of tips that you would give, maybe on a more personal level, of how like you can kind of manage that situation?
Well, I think everyone likes to be liked. Okay, that's the first problem. So when we all start working, we you know, luckily, usually it's quite collaborative at the early stages, but then the further up the chain you get, the more responsibility you have, and the more likely you are to be making decisions that people might not like. You know, I mean, I generally am not a very popular person in the businesses that I go into necessarily, because I'm there to make difficult choices. So I really believe in building a network beyond my current projects. And I think if you can start out with that mindset, when you do have difficult problems to do, you will have a network of people that you can go and talk to. So for example, at New and Lingwood, I was charged with improving the online sales. Now I'm not, you know, technology is not my bag, but it was a project. And I went out to my network and said, what does everyone's digital team look like? You know, how is it structured? What does it look like? And I got back lots of feedback. And then it became quite a procurement process. You know, it was very clear why ours wasn't working, because we were missing like 2 key people. So I think that's what I would say, is it's never too early to start expanding your network and finding people who can help you with problems that you have. Don't be afraid to ask as well. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of help out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And at what point is it that you should know that your business is ready to scale, when you're ready to take the next steps?
Well, I think that would be when you're turning down business opportunities because you don't have enough product or you don't have enough people. I mean, that would be, for me, a very clear marker. I think it's less about whether you're profitable, because your objective might be to build quite a small, profitable brand working in quite a contained way, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Or you might have an ambition to be a global brand, in which case obviously you will need to scale. So it's not about profitability, it's about demand. And I think, when you get to that point, you need to start reinforcing your infrastructure and setting goals to help you plan ahead. And that is another point at which you can go out and get additional help. Like, what is it that an investor is going to want from your business? What does it need to look like? What are the markers that it needs to get to? You might not need investment, but you might need to collaborate with other businesses to push yourself forward. So I would suggest it's when you're turning down opportunities and you're not able to take everything that's on offer. And these are real opportunities. These are not just things that you think might help. If I had more product, I might be able to sell in China, is not the same as someone coming to your door and saying, we want your products in China. Yeah. And you saying, actually, I can't physically make anymore. There's a difference.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good indicator, because I think a lot of people might feel like they're ready, but might not necessarily have reached that point. And I think that's a really key kind of way to know that it's kind of ready to take the next step.
Well, when you sent me that question, I had a bit of a think about it, and I found a quote from Richard Branson, who said, focus on your passion, start small, dream big, plan ahead, and only scale up when you feel ready, and not just because opportunity knocks. Don't create unnecessary risks. And I thought, actually, that really sums it all up in a couple of lines. So well done, Richard. Well, even though your empire's crashing today.
I was going to say it's clearly worked for him, but perhaps not anymore. So
yeah, exactly.
That's another webinar. And kind of, I feel like a big buzzword in business, and particularly fashion and being a designer, having a brand, the big buzzword at the moment is definitely sustainability. There's a big want from it from the consumer side of things, and obviously I know that LDCs, it's one of our kind of core factors, and we're definitely kind of focusing on sustainable brands, independent brands, but it's such a huge spectrum in terms of business, and where do you think this can play the biggest role in a company?
Well, you're right. It's a big buzzword at the moment, and it will be interesting how people manage it as we come out of this current lockdown, because I would have said before it was a priority, and I think now just keeping afloat is a priority. So there'll be some interesting things around that. I mean, we are all responsible. We all have a responsibility to build a sustainable future. I mean, every single one of us, that's very clear. And I think the kind of environmental, social and governance capabilities of your business are important, and they're particularly important to investors. Now they are looking at that as those ESG markers as something. So we should be serious about it now. I think you can only control what you can control. And if you're a small business, you can't control everything. My advice is to look at what an ideal would look like, and then start working towards that. So you could say, for example, if you're, for a fashion brand, you've got the following components. You've got fabric, right? Okay, well, you choose where you buy your fabric. I wouldn't, you could look at buying BCI cotton. You could say to yourself, okay, 50% of the fabric I'm going to buy is going to have an element of sustainability about it. I'm going to be able to say that it's BCI cotton or it's recycled polyester. This whole area is quite a minefield, and it's a minefield that I'm really fascinated by, and it's really very difficult to get fully circular and fully sustainable fabrics across lots of things. It's not really very clear. You'll have people who say their fabric is sustainable, but it's only 15% sustainable. So it is a bit of a minefield, but I think you can make some choices for your products. And if you're making everything in sequins, well, then maybe fabric's not where you're going to start worrying, because it's going to be very difficult for you to make an impact on that. So I think we have to be a bit realistic as a starting point. Then dyeing. Can you be sure where it's being dyed? How are they processing the waste from the dye? If it's denim, can you buy a denim that is not using so much water? So these are questions. My feeling is that fabric that is being produced in that way is only 10-15% more expensive than the normal route. So I don't think I think we could do the fabric, because it's not a huge part of the cost of a garment generally. I mean, it can be, but it's not of the whole cost. It's not big. Next step will be manufacturing. Go visit the factory, without a shadow of a doubt. Every factory that I've ever worked with, I've been to visit, and you walk in and you can see whether it's tidy, whether it's clean, is there a canteen, what does the loo look like, how do the workers look, how do the factory owners manage their trim supplies, all of this type of thing. And it will really give you a very good indication of whether they're treating their staff well, how they feel generally about things. So whether it's in the UK, if you can afford to do it overseas, I would definitely go visit the factory. And then you can make your own mind up from that point. What you may decide, actually, that's still the best factory for you, because you're very small at the moment, but it might then become a project that you want to change as soon as you can. So how does it look at the moment, and where do I want it to get to? You've got your trims and packaging. Quite a lot of label suppliers now will have fully sustainable ranges, so you can look at cost those into your garments, and the same amongst packaging. Packaging is quite hard, because is the packaging sustainable? If I use a biodegradable bag and I choose to ship something from Bangladesh, the chances are it will turn up moldy. So that's not a great idea. So you've got some balances there. And then the final part is a carbon footprint, and the kind of, can I pack it in something that I'm going to then give it to the consumer in, so I'm not throwing stuff away. If I am throwing stuff away and it's recyclable, is it being recycled? So without making it too complicated, I would look at the chain as it stands at the moment, decide which bits of it you like least, and then start working towards improving that, and then go back and in 6 months' time and say, okay, I've solved that one. Now what's the bit that I'm going to solve next? And I think that's the way that a small brand can approach being sustainable. I mean, there are some amazing brands that are 100% kind of sustainable. Two that I've come across are Cressy and Elvis. They recycle firemen's hoses. Their whole business, I don't know if you've come across them, it's amazing. But they've got water treatment here, and they reuse anything that comes near them, and they're buying offcuts from Burberry, and it's really inspiring. But that's a mission. That's not a kind of business. And I was hearing about another company called Vin and Omni. They spent 7 years researching theirs before they launched. I mean, most of us don't have the income or the time. So I think control what you can control, be realistic, and try and be really transparent. Even if you don't like the answer, understand what the answer is. That's my feeling on sustainable sourcing. And that's what we were trying to do at New and Lingwood. We were looking at what does the chain look like? Are we happy with the elements of the chain, and which bits can we improve? Have I gone quiet again?
No, you're good. No, I definitely think it's like, as you say, it's a journey. If we could all be sustainable like that, then we would. Everyone would have. But it's definitely, you've got to do as much as you can, and with success, that means that you should be able to kind of expand that and offer more support in different areas, things like that. Coming on to our next topic, pricing. This is such a huge one, and especially for kind of brands that might not necessarily have a lot of experience in fashion, or kind of you can underprice, you can overprice. There's so many different things to take into consideration: manufacturing costs, giving your business and employees a salary, kind of things like that. Talk to us about pricing. How do we know that it's right?
Yes, well, that is a question I get asked quite often. Is this the right price? That's the question I get asked, and as you say, it's a very complex thing. Well, it's complex, but it's not really that complicated. I mean, we need to make money. You need to cover your costs. You need to take some profit, and you need to look to the future. If you had a crystal ball, we'd all write those down as objectives, which is why I think my original point about having a goal is really important, because if you know where you're going, at least you can put the steps in to get there. Pricing was a key issue at my role with Marks and Spencer's. I knew we forensically investigated the cost of things. How long did it take to stitch a side seam on a pair of trousers? I could tell you that, how many minutes and how many cents it cost.
Wow.
At Chester Barry, same thing. Our profit, the business had no profit, and I know that the price, there is always margin in the supply chain. Margin that's usually being wasted that could be put into your bottom line. So pricing is key no matter what size you are. I think the first thing is to know what they are, know what your costs are, and to know what your revenue target is. And that's your starting point. So if you have a costing sheet, and pretty much everybody I know work with have a costing sheet, and that will have the fabric price in it, the manufacturing costs, some shipping, usually some trim, and then they'll have a selling price. And that's kind of the basic starting point. I find a lot of small businesses do the costing after they've bought the garment, which is not brilliant. You need to do the costing before, because once you've got your selling price and you've got your costing in there, you then have to look at those are all your variable costs, but then you've got all of your fixed costs that you need to start putting through your pricing as well, which are your overheads, your rent, your marketing budget, your sampling costs. Sampling costs often disappear off the face of the earth, and your salary, and the salary of anyone else that's working for you. So those need to be accounted for as well. And then you can, once you've got your costing sheet, your buying plan and your sales plan, you can then see whether you're paying the right amount and whether you're making any money. I mean, and it's only at that point that you can really tell. And I think a lot of people say, I never spend more than £15 on a meter of fabric, and I know as long as I do that, I'll be fine. And it just doesn't work like that. It's the mathematical piece of work, and you need to do it, and it needs to be right, and it needs to have everything in it. And then once it's got everything in it, you can then decide which are the bits that you need to save. Can you save money? Can you make more money? How much of this product do you think you're going to sell at full price versus half price? What does it look like when you do that? If you want to sell this particular dress for less because you don't think it's worth £200, but you think you'll get lots of people that will buy it for 150, what is the thing that you're going to sell at a higher price to compensate for that margin loss? So that's why a costing sheet is really is really a key place to start. And that will tell you what price you should be selling your products at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's, very, very useful there. And so kind of what we were looking at next was kind of business routes that you can go down in terms of actually selling your products, and what makes the most sense, and is the most profitable, particularly for smaller brands. Wholesale is kind of, I feel like, the goal for most people often, but it's changed a lot, and there are so many different factors to kind of account for in wholesale. Is this still the best route to go down? Like, what's happening with wholesale at the moment?
Well, I think so. I've done retail, concession, licensing, wholesale, and direct to consumer. So I've done all of them, and I think they all have different benefits and negatives. And I wouldn't do one of any one things. And if you look at most brands, they do different things across the board. You know, they'll do some wholesale, they'll have their online sales, and they'll have their retail sales, and they may even have some concessions somewhere else. So wholesale is great because once you've sold it, you then usually go and make it. So you don't have to, you know, you're going to get paid for it before you actually make it. So that's definitely a plus. It builds brand awareness, which is good as well, because you know, if you can open in another country, for example, or another city in this country, then it builds your brand awareness and you can start to market to a different demographic of people. So those are the kind of pluses, and it can do it quite quickly and it can do it at scale. The negatives are a lot of the hidden costs in it that people don't realize, which are the settlement discounts, the cancellation fines, the additional cost for web photography, marketing contributions, a discount on the product in the first place. So those are some of the, you know, the tread carefully. I think when you're a small brand and you're moving, you know, you're not just starting out, but you're still in the early stages, I think the pop-ups are amazing because I think they give you the opportunity to stand in front of customers and find out what they really think about your product. And they are such an amazing place to collect data on customers. Why do they come to you? What do they like about you? How can you find more of them? They might be telling you your product's too expensive, or it doesn't fit, or things that would take you ages to find out from your website. So I think definitely have a line in your sales of wholesale and see how you do against that budget, against that plan. But I definitely think pop-ups and working on affiliate websites can be a really good way of growing your brand as well. I mean, one thing to note with wholesale customers is do not assume that once, if you've sold your product into Selfridges, say, amazing, fantastic, you've got to make sure it sells through. So you're almost better doing a pop-up in Selfridges and having you stand there and talk to the customer in Selfridges about your brand, because otherwise they can quite often get lost. So a buyer will only come back to your brand if it's sold through. They'll have a certain sell-through requirement, and if it failed to meet that sell-through requirement, you'll be out as fast as you were in. So I think timing is quite important as well. So that, you know, definitely wholesale's great, but tread carefully.
Yeah. Well, we kind of mentioned pop-ups there and how it can benefit brand. Obviously that's kind of our area of expertise, and I would definitely agree that, you know, running your own pop-up is hugely expensive, but being able to kind of split that cost is a great way to kind of trial it and know that if there's something off with your sizing, off with your pricing or something, then you get that feedback directly from the customer, which is definitely valuable, kind of, especially when you're starting out at the beginning. And I think
I wanted to actually, sorry to interrupt, I've just thought about something else as well. Don't forget collaborations too, because there's, you know, a pop-up by yourself might be too expensive and not relevant, but a collaboration with a couple of other brands that makes sense could be, you know, that is a really interesting way of growing your audience at relatively low cost, as long as you're clear about what you're giving them and what they're giving you in terms of audience, data, customers, and all the rest of it. I think that can be a really good way to grow as well and build brand awareness. Sorry, but just thought about that.
No, definitely, and obviously the cross promotional opportunities there maximizes it massively. Yeah, so I think that was everything that we kind of wanted to cover in terms of the areas that you can offer your help and expertise. Do you want to just take us through your consultation package and mentoring scheme in kind of detail? Oh, sorry, we've just had a question pop up. If you're happy to answer that before we move on. Just a quick note, if anyone else has any questions, do feel free to ask them. We'll answer everything we can. So in lieu of the current climate, are online pop-ups an avenue to explore, and what advice would you give businesses which are new with the current climate?
Well, what is an online pop-up? I mean, I know about a website, and I can imagine why someone would try putting products on a Farfetched or with you. Or yesterday I was listening to the CEO of Jules, and they have friends of Jules, and you've got Not on the High Street. So there's lots of places that you can put things. But what's an online pop-up? I'm fascinated.
Well, I mean, for us, obviously we have our digital store, but that is much more physical than, or not physical, but much more permanent than kind of pop-up, so to speak, as it's available 24/7. You can shop it anywhere in the world, and brands are there for a minimum of 3 months.
Well, I would definitely be trying to put my products on, there's going to be a hell of a lot of stock. I think there will be a lot of people who are not financially secure, so they're not going to be buying. My advice to businesses has been to really think hard about purchasing anything unless you absolutely need to. This is where the planning is so important, and remodeling and reforecasting becomes rather a nightmare. So yes, if there's an opportunity to be on a website like Loan Design Club, I would definitely take it. But don't just sit there assuming people will find you because you're now on that website. Market yourself so people know where to go and look for you. I think that is a key part that businesses sort of forget. They're kind of so happy that they got on that they then forget that they've got just as much influence of driving traffic to it as anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you said again, with the cross-promotional marketing from each brand, if everyone is marketing that one platform, then that kind of massively expands the outreach, because shouldn't be afraid of inviting your customers to be someone else's customers as well. It's
100%.
It's helping everyone. It's definitely kind of the brands that we see being more successful are the ones that are kind of listing it and promoting it, and exclusivity, exclusive collections and items, definitely kind of.
Yeah, I know that approach was quite successful before launching earlier online, before you launch in store, having specific online only products. These are all things that can give you a marketing story, but they can also they definitely do encourage sales.
Definitely. And another question here, what about using sales agents?
Yes, I'm a believer in using external people, but I think you have to be clear about what you are hoping that person's going to do for you. And I think you do have to spend a bit of time finding the right person. So at New and Lingwood, we had, he was already working when I arrived, but he was charged with doing wholesale sales for them. They'd never done wholesale sales before. I was a bit skeptical. I wasn't that familiar with their products at that point. They did actually have an amazing USP, which he and I both latched on. I do have a lot of experience of wholesaling to David Jones in Australia, to Coin in Italy. So lots of, I know what these businesses generally want. And he worked for 1.5 days a week and was very good. I mean, I think that New and Lingwood are in Harrods this autumn. So, I mean, COVID assuming it's still on, but I think it can be very successful, but it is about choosing the right person, and it's about listening to what they're telling you as well. I would pick someone who has a similar stable of products, because what you're paying for is their contact and their relationship with buyers that you don't know. So it's good. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I can help with, because there's, depending on the product, depending on the market, depending on the ambition, depends on the kind of questions you would ask, and then and that is very much the kind of thing that I do with, I do with New and Lingwood as well. But so yes, I think you can use a sales agent, but I would probably be inclined to pay one. I mean, there would be a commission aspect to it, but I would be nervous about expecting someone to promote my product and only get commission from it. And I would be wanting to try it nearer to home so that I could learn from it rather than a long way away. That would be my other advice, so that you can learn from them. You can see if they're selling in Europe, you can go visit the account that they've sold into and see how your product's presented, and then meet the buyers. Whereas obviously the further away you get, the more expensive that becomes, and of course it's all impossible at the moment. But there's nothing you do. It is good to see the store and the environment it's in, which you can't obviously do on a Zoom call like this.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And so, just conscious of time, I think we need to start. No, that was great. Yeah, tell us about kind of your services and what you can do, as what kind of covering what we've discussed.
So with my old mentoring hat on and understanding what the kind of questions that I used to get asked, the projects I work on now are big, and you tend to do a piece of due diligence, and that's expensive, and so on and so forth. Most people have one problem or two or three problems, and I'm suggesting that we start with an initial call of an hour, and you pick one thing that you think is a headache, and it could be like, I don't know, how do I calculate the optimal price? I mean, there we go. And then we can talk through the steps of what you currently do and what you're currently getting, and see if there's any things that I think you're missing out in your calculation. And then, that would, I mean, I'm using that as an example. It could be anything. It could be wholesaling. It could be whatever. But let's focus on one thing. Everything is connected. Which is why it's usually quite complicated, and why people often charge a lot of money, because you kind of need all the threads before you can start giving some good advice. But I think there's a lot to be done in 1 hour with one thing. We'll give you a chance to talk to me one-to-one and see if I'm your cup of tea, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then I find it most successful when advice is delivered over a period of time, which is why I'm suggesting a 6-month period, because sometimes you get very, very busy and you can't do what you wanted to do before the next meeting. And then that's frustrating because you feel you're spending money on something you're not getting. So I'm suggesting that there's a kind of monthly call, which is an hour, and they can be on Zoom. So you can record them, you can go back to them later. They're yours to keep. And that's the same with the initial call as well. And then if you want to email me, that's fine. You can email me with queries whenever you want. And if you want a quick weekly catch-up call, that should be fine too, because I tend to find that there's more questions at the beginning or in batches. So that's how I would propose to work, because I think that's what you'll get the best out of me for the best value for you. I mean, it is, you will have to do the work. I'm not going to do the work for you. I'll just mention that now. But I will make the work that I ask you to do more efficient, I think is kind of what I'm saying, more targeted.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, just that value of, you do need to be able to do the work yourself, but knowing that you're doing it in the right direction and kind of making sure that what you do will work instead of working really hard and then maybe not getting somewhere, missed a step along the way.
I think asking, yeah, I think most of the time you will know the answer to your question, but quite often you don't want to be held accountable for that answer because it doesn't feel comfortable. And that's nothing is right or wrong. It's just how where you choose to put your efforts and what your realistic expectations are from those efforts. I'm now going to stop talking, sorry.
No, that's perfect. That's really perfect. And I'll be sending a follow-up email round to everyone who has joined us today. And yeah, I'll be sharing more information on Karen's services. Just had another question here, which is saying, how much is it for the hour consultation?
It's £99 for an hour.
There you go. And yeah, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to email me. My email is amanda@loandesignclub.com, but I will be following up with all of you after this, so no need to transact. And you can also find more information on the LDC website. It is listed in the event page that you would have signed up to today. Karen, thank you so much. That was super interesting. Great feedback from people in the chat box as well. So thank you for giving us your time and answering all of these questions. And yeah, very much looking forward to working with you further. And thank you everyone for tuning in today and for joining us. I hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday and a great evening.
Okay, all right, well, thank you everybody for listening, and yeah, and I'm a great fan of the Loan Design Club, so
thank you.
That's my last word. Okay. Thank you, Amanda. Bye-bye.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're going to